Hi, I'm Raylene. 3 months before my sister's wedding, I paid the deposit on the venue. 2 weeks later, they removed me from the bridal party without a word. Then Delphine looked me in the eye and said, "You're not welcome at the wedding." We all agreed. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the months of silence that came before. The fake messages, the forged signature, my own mother presenting the honeymoon I planned as her gift. How do you stay in a family that rewrites you out of the story? And when you finally draw the line, what happens when they cross it anyway? Let me tell you what I did next. It was supposed to be a casual family check-in. That's what Delphine called it when she texted me earlier in the week. Low-key dinner at my place, just us. Mom's bringing dessert. That's all she said. But something about the wording it had that polished chill Delphine used when she'd already made decisions and just wanted everyone else to show up and nod. I pulled into her driveway around 6. Her porch lights were already on, and the sound of voices drifted from the open kitchen window. Familiar voices. Not laughter, just discussion. Strategy, maybe? As I walked in, I spotted them all sitting in the living room. Cordelia perched on the armrest like a queen mother, arms crossed in her typical self-assured pose. Silas, our dad, sat slightly off to the side, like always, eyes trained on the floor. Vanessa, our middle sister, smiled too tightly. And there was Marjorie, our cousin, sitting cross-legged on the couch, like she belonged there, like she had earned a place I didn't know I was giving up. Delphine stood in the center. Her dress was too formal for a family hangout, and that's when I knew this wasn't dinner. This was something else. She didn't waste time. No hugs, no wine offered. "We've all discussed it," she began, clasping her hands together like some corporate manager. "And we feel it's best if you don't attend the wedding." I blinked. "Excuse me?" My voice came out steady, too steady for someone getting blindsided. "We just think your presence would complicate things. You've made a lot of things tense, and this day is supposed to be about peace and joy, not distractions." I scanned the room, searching for a pair of eyes willing to meet mine with protest, defense hell, even doubt. But they all avoided me. Cordelia looked smug. Silas pretended to be deep in thought. Vanessa folded her hands in her lap and stared at her nails. No one stopped her. It didn't feel like betrayal in that moment. It felt like erasure. Neat, clean, pre-approved by a committee I was never part of. I sat in silence for a while, long enough for Delphine to shift uncomfortably, long enough for Cordelia to clear her throat. "It's not personal," Delphine added, which ironically made it feel even more personal. "We just all agreed this was best." I nodded slowly, eyes unfocused. "Right. You all agreed." It wasn't anger that rose in me. It was recognition. The kind you get when a final puzzle piece clicks into place, not because it fits, but because it never did. The drive home blurred into streaks of orange light and half-heard radio static. I didn't cry. Not yet. Later that night, curled up on my apartment couch with my laptop balanced on my knees, I opened the family group chat, vibrant with plans, links to wedding cake samples, venue ideas. I scrolled back. 6 weeks ago, the conversation shifted. I hadn't been looped in on any major decisions. My questions were skimmed over. "We already handled that," became the most frequent response. I remembered the venue suddenly being confirmed. No one had asked my opinion. I remembered Cordelia announcing, during brunch, that we finally got our dream spot. I thought she meant the family dream. Now I knew better. I also remembered that Sunday brunch Delphine showed up late, glowing from a cake tasting I hadn't known about. "Mom and I stopped by a bakery nearby," she'd said, waving it off, "just playing around with flavors." I had smiled and nodded, like a damn intern. Back then, I thought maybe I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid, sensitive. But now, with the memory of her words still echoing, "You're not welcome at the wedding," I realized it wasn't paranoia. It was planning. This hadn't started tonight. It had started long before I was even aware I'd been voted off the island. And I had been cooperative. I had helped with payments. I'd Venmo'd deposits. I'd sent spreadsheets. The wedding Pinterest board used to be ours. Now it had Marjorie's name on it. She even changed the password. Funny how people don't kick you out of something all at once. They just stop sending invites. The worst part wasn't losing the title of maid of honor. It was knowing they'd reassigned it, without telling me like swapping seats at a table and pretending mine never had a place card. I didn't slam the door on the way out of Delphine's house. That would have implied it was still mine to slam. I just walked out, no shoes kicked off, no tears in my throat. As I reached my car, I whispered the only words I had left. Thanks for the clarity. By the time I got home that night, I didn't even bother turning on the lights. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, slipped off my shoes, and let the weight of it all press down on me. For once, the silence in my apartment didn't feel like peace. It felt like a verdict. I stood in the kitchen for a while, just staring out the window into the alley below. A raccoon climbed into a tipped-over trash bin. Even that had more dignity than the conversation I'd just walked away from. 3 months before all of this, Delphine called me during her lunch break. Ray, the venue we love, Blue Ridge Summit, they just called. They've got a cancellation for the date we wanted. That's great, I said, sipping stale office coffee. But we've got to put a deposit down by Friday. I'm a little tight this month. Can you float it? I didn't even hesitate. I transferred $3,000 that afternoon. No contract, no talk of splitting. Just a screenshot and a text. Handled. Happy for you. I didn't think twice about it. That's what sisters do, right? A week later, we had dinner at Mom's. It was one of those semi-forced, pasta-on-paper plates nights Cordelia insisted on hosting every so often to prove we were still a family. Over meatballs and boxed wine, she beamed and said, I'm just so proud of how Marjorie stepped up. Not many people would take care of things like that so quickly. Marjorie smiled into her glass like she'd earned a medal. I looked at Delphine. She didn't correct her, didn't flinch. I didn't say anything either. But that was the night I started taking notes in my head, in my phone. Not because I was planning a fight, but because I needed to remember I wasn't crazy. Things didn't happen all at once. They were gradual, like a faucet dripping behind a wall, until one day your foundation collapses, and someone tells you it was water damage all along. 2 weeks after that, I got a group email from the wedding planning team, Delphine, Mom, and yes, Marjorie. The subject line read, Wedding team structure finalized, my role, not maid of honor, not even bridesmaid. Venue liaison operations support, no call, no warning. Just a title downgrade like we were restructuring an office, and I'd been moved to the basement. I texted Delphine. Is this a mistake? She replied 10 minutes later. You're great at organizing. I just thought this fits better. You get stuff done. That was it. I stared at the screen. No thank you, no explanation. And definitely no acknowledgement that she had just kicked me out of a role I had never even questioned. I didn't reply. Some things you let sit in silence, not because you're scared, but because responding gives it legitimacy. I wouldn't give them that. A few days later, we were at brunch, just the women. Cordelia was in rare form, floating between conversations like a queen surveying her court. Marjorie really stepped up when no one else did, she said, loud enough for the entire table to hear. God knows where we'd be without her. Vanessa glanced at me. That was all she did. A glance. She didn't object, didn't even shift in her seat, and I felt something subtle and sour twist in my chest. I knew that look. It was the look people gave when they wanted to help, but were too afraid to get pulled under with you. No one else did. That phrase didn't just sting. It rewrote history. It erased spreadsheets, transfers, late-night calls about table layouts. It erased me. There's a cruelty to selective memory. It lets people decide which parts of you to keep and which to discard, and they almost always discard the parts that made them uncomfortable. A week later was the bridal shower. Delphine wanted it at the same Mountain View event space where she and James were getting married. She said it was a test run. I showed up early, as usual, helping the florist unload arrangements and setting name cards on the tables. Marjorie was sipping champagne and adjusting the gift table. She wore white. I don't know why that bothered me so much, but it did. Halfway through the event, one of the guests, some distant aunt from James's, side-tapped my shoulder. "Excuse me, sweetheart, are you with the catering company? Can I ask about the vegetarian options?" I smiled. "I'm actually the bride's sister." She blinked. "Oh, I just thought, sorry." "It's okay," I said, but it wasn't. Not really. Delphine overheard. She looked over, smirked slightly, and turned back to her conversation. No correction, no acknowledgement. And that's when I knew. They didn't want me gone. They wanted me quiet. Useful, but invisible. Present, but out of frame. That day, something shifted. I stopped offering. I started watching. I didn't go home right after the shower. I wasn't ready to sit with my thoughts yet. Instead, I wandered into a bookstore a few blocks away, the kind with creaky floors and a bell on the door that sounded more like an apology than a greeting. I pretended to browse, but I wasn't really reading. I was rewinding. The guest had called me sweetheart, asked if I knew the vegetarian options, thought I worked there. And Delphine heard it, seen it, smirked, didn't lift a finger. By the time I left the bookstore, dusk had settled over Asheville like a wet towel. I took the long way home, stopping for gas I didn't need, just to delay the stillness. My phone buzzed as I walked in the door. It was Natalie, a coworker from my office. "Your sister looked absolutely gorgeous in that gown yesterday," she texted, followed by a heart emoji. I stared at the screen. "What gown?" I typed back. She replied instantly. "The A-line one at Vivian's Bridal. Sandra said she found the one almost immediately. I figured you were their maid of honor and all." I couldn't breathe for a second. I managed a reply. "Must be been a last-minute thing. I had to work. She didn't question it. Why would she?" I sat down on the edge of my bed, still holding my phone, trying to trace the timeline. When had the appointment been made? Who had gone with her? Why hadn't she said anything? No, that wasn't the question. Why had she chosen not to say anything? That's what gnawed at me. This wasn't a slip. This was deliberate. I went into the bathroom, locked the door behind me, and turned on the faucet loud enough to drown out the building static in my head. I didn't cry. Not exactly. It was more like leaking, quietly, controlled. I stayed in there long enough to miss dinner. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, and the memory came back like a flashbulb. We were 7 and 9, me and Delphine. It was a rainy Saturday, and we were playing wedding in the living room. Mom's old pillowcases became veils. Delphine wore white, of course. I was the officiant. We took it very seriously. There was even a bouquet made of toilet paper rolls. We pinky swore that when we got married, one day far in the future, we'd pick each other's dresses. "No matter what," she said. I believed her. Now? That memory burned. It wasn't the dress. It wasn't the boutique. It was the absence of hesitation. She didn't even struggle with leaving me out. It was clean, surgical. That weekend, we had a small gathering at Mom's. Just aunts, cousins, the usual spread of potato salad and backhanded compliments. Cordelia had rearranged the living room. Her latest obsession was displaying event mock-ups, as she called them. On the fireplace mantel sat a framed photo-one I hadn't seen before. It was labeled Wedding Welcome Display Draft Number 2. In the photo were Delphine, Vanessa, and Marjorie arm in arm, backlit by the venue's signature magnolia arch. No me. I stared at it for several seconds, pretending to sip my lukewarm iced tea. Cordelia noticed. "Oh, we just couldn't find a good photo of you with matching lighting," she said casually, as if explaining a technical glitch. I didn't respond. What could I say? That lighting had never been the issue? Later that night, back in my apartment, I scrolled through my camera roll. I found the perfect photo taken at last year's Christmas dinner. Me and Delphine, side by side, laughing at something Silas had said. Our faces soft, eyes lit by candlelight. Lighting flawless. I stared at it for a long time. Then I hit delete. Not out of spite. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I finally saw it for what it was, an illusion. A perfectly timed click that captured something we both knew wasn't real anymore. You don't get cropped out of a frame you were never supposed to be in. After deleting that photo, I thought maybe I'd feel lighter. But clarity doesn't always come with peace. Sometimes it brings heat, quiet, slow-burning heat that settles in your chest and waits. That night, I left my phone face down and tried to sleep. I couldn't. The next morning, while I was pouring coffee in the office kitchen, Jenny from marketing walked in, all cheerful energy and too much perfume. "I saw your name on the seating chart," she said, like it was breaking news. I blinked. Seating chart? For the wedding. Marjorie posted it on the wedding site last night. I was checking for dietary options and saw your name. It said Rachel L., but I figured it had to be you. I didn't react right away. She laughed. They probably just mistyped it. Or maybe you're going undercover as a volunteer. What did it list me as? I asked, keeping my tone light. She tilted her head. Something like venue assistant? I don't remember the exact wording. I forced a laugh, finished pouring my coffee, and walked straight back to my desk. I didn't even sit down. I opened the wedding site from my work computer. There it was. Rachel L. Venue Volunteer, Table 9. My hands were steady as I reached for my phone. I texted Delphine. "Did you see the wedding seating list?" No response. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. My name's listed wrong. And my role too. Still nothing. I opened our last message thread. She'd left me on read the week before. That was becoming a pattern. I pushed back from my desk and went to the restroom. Locked the door. Opened my archived texts with her, scrolling back through months of exchanges. Planning details, money transfers, vendor discussions. But something felt off. A few hours later, back at home, I opened my old laptop. That one hadn't synced in a while. I pulled up backups, old message exports. Side by side, I compared what I remembered sending with what Delphine had referenced in recent conversations. It didn't line up. There were entire replies that had been changed. One message I'd written, "I think the seafood buffet might be too expensive," had somehow become, "Seafood is tacky, not our crowd." Another I never sent at all, "The bridesmaids look like waitresses," showed up in a screenshot forwarded to Cordelia. I sat there staring at the screen. I wasn't angry, not yet, just stunned. Someone had used my tone, my style, my name, but it wasn't me. The idea that my own words had been twisted, edited to make me sound petty, ungrateful, elitist, was worse than being ignored. It was being rewritten. It wasn't a stretch to guess who was behind it. Delphine had always been good at polishing a narrative, especially if it kept her out of the line of fire. But I'd never expected her to paint me as the fire itself. I called her that evening. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey," she said flatly, "we need to talk." There was a pause. "About what?" "The messages. The things you've been showing people. They're not mine, not like that." Another pause. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Ray." I took a breath. "I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you. I've seen both versions. And if it happens again, I won't be this quiet about it." She exhaled, slow and performative. "I think you're overreacting." "No," I said. "I think you've gotten too used to me staying quiet." There was nothing else to say, so I hung up. Later that week, I got a message from a friend of James' family. A friendly heads up. Apparently, Cordelia had mentioned in passing that I was helping out with logistics, since I wasn't really suited for a formal role. I wasn't surprised. They weren't just excluding me. They were reframing me. Publicly, deliberately. I didn't argue. I didn't send a rebuttal email. I didn't call to defend myself. Because I'd learned something. Sometimes the best way to answer a lie isn't with a louder truth. It's with evidence. 2 days after that call with Delphine, I was back in my kitchen, sorting receipts for my monthly tax log. I've always tracked things closely, habit from working in finance. That's when I spotted it. A charge I didn't recognize. Then another. Same florist Delphine had picked, same vendor code listed under my account. I opened my bank app and scanned deeper. There were charges I hadn't approved, premium upgrades for table centerpieces, express delivery fees, even a payment to a calligrapher I'd never heard of. I didn't panic. I flagged the transactions, called the bank, and requested statements. The woman on the phone asked gently, "Are these disputed charges related to a shared family event?" I paused. Yes. And no. Not exactly. She said she'd open an investigation. I said thank you and hung up. That night, I sat with the spreadsheet open on my laptop. Column A, dates. Column B, vendor. Column C, who initiated payment. Column D, comments. That last one was where I began writing things I didn't plan to send to anyone but needed recorded anyway. Delphine said they were covered. Cordelia insisted on upgrading linens, never asked. Charged to me without consent. The next morning, I drove to the hotel where the wedding was scheduled. I'd been there once before, back when I was still looped in. It was a boutique-style venue, small and overpriced, Delphine's kind of place. The event manager greeted me politely. I gave her my name and said I needed to verify some documents related to the wedding booking. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded and brought out a slim file folder. When she flipped it open, I saw it immediately, my name printed next to Delphine's under secondary financial sponsor. Underneath that, a signature that looked like mine. But it wasn't. The angle of the R, the loop on the lit, was close, but not mine. I kept my face neutral. Who dropped this off? She hesitated, then said, "Your mother, I believe. Cordelia, right?" I nodded slowly. "Can I take a copy?" "Of course." I left with the paper in a manila envelope tucked under my arm. I didn't shake. I didn't curse. I just drove straight to a quiet cafe downtown and texted Delphine. "Meet me at Common Grounds, 30 minutes. To her credit, she came. She walked in wearing sunglasses and a cardigan draped over her shoulders like a politician about to deflect scandal. I was already seated, a folder resting between my hands, like it weighed nothing, but it did. We skipped the small talk. I opened the folder and spread out the contents. The bank statement, screenshots of vendor charges, a printed version of the wedding file from the hotel with the forged signature highlighted. Delphine stared at it all, said nothing. Then she reached for her iced coffee, took a slow sip, and said, "It was for the wedding. You always said you wanted it to be beautiful." I kept my voice even. "I said I wanted you to be happy. Not that I wanted my name used like a credit card." She shrugged slightly. "You were already paying for things. What difference did it make?" "The difference," I said, "is permission. The difference is respect." She let the silence sit between us for a beat too long, then said, "You're blowing this out of proportion." I leaned back. "No, I'm drawing a line. And here's the thing about linesons, they're crossed. There's no going back." She looked away, out toward the sidewalk. "Mom thought you'd understand." I smiled tightly. "That's the problem. You all think I'm built to understand, to excuse, to absorb." She didn't argue, and that, more than anything, told me she knew I was right. I stood up, slid the folder back into my tote, and adjusted my jacket. As I turned to leave, I said, "Perfect doesn't mean silent, and it sure as hell doesn't mean stolen." I walked out without waiting for her to follow. And for the first time since this mess began, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for the space I claimed. When I got back to my apartment after the caf, I didn't even take my coat off. I went straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into the travel account I'd been using for the honeymoon gift. The browser still had the page open first-class flights to Bali, ocean view villa, private chef, everything down to the candlelit massage package. My finger hovered over the cancel reservation button longer than I'd expected. There was a moment, just one, where I asked myself if this was too petty, if I was letting emotion win over decency. But then I remembered Delphine's shrug, her lazy sip of iced coffee, Cordelia forging my name like it was just another signature in a stack. Click, cancellation confirmed. A refund email followed, then another. I closed my laptop. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. The kind of clean that comes when you finally pull a thorn that's been in your skin so long, you'd convinced yourself it was just part of your body. The next day was quiet, until around 8:45 p.m. I was brushing my teeth when my phone lit up. Instagram notification from a name I didn't immediately recognize. A woman with a profile picture of a golden retriever and the handle, "AW Events by Erica." Her message was short. "Hi, Raylene. Just wanted to say the Bali honeymoon package looked incredible. So thoughtful of you. I saw your name on the invoice. Thought it was sweet of the family to highlight you." I stared at the message. The honeymoon was never public. It was supposed to be a surprise me surprise. The plan was to reveal it at the rehearsal dinner, a quiet moment with Delphine and James before the chaos of the big day. I hadn't even told Vanessa. I replied, "Hey." "What invoice?" Erica responded within minutes. "Oh, it was included in the PDF timeline Cordelia sent out to vendors. There was a line about the generous honeymoon gift from the family, and it had a screenshot of your reservation confirmation. It had your name and email at the top. I figured it was okay to share since she sent it to everyone." I didn't type anything back. I sat down at the edge of my bed and tried to process what I'd just read. Cordelia had taken the one thing I'd planned to give from a place of love and twisted it, framed it as a family contribution without asking. Worse, she'd made it look like I'd signed off on it. I opened the original itinerary email from the concierge service. There it was, my name, my account, my email, all forwarded, all attached to a wedding agenda I was no longer welcome to attend. I didn't wait. I logged into the concierge site, opened my file, and began canceling everything. The driver, the welcome basket, the massage, the villa, the flights, every last part. Then I wrote an email to Delphine. Subject, honeymoon itinerary body. You won't be needing those plane tickets. I've decided not to contribute this time. That was it. No explanation, no breakdown of why. Just fact. She didn't respond that night, or the next day, but I saw that the message had been read. The little scene indicator flickered beneath it, cool and impersonal, like a receipt from a conversation no one had the guts to have out loud. Later that week, I got a text from an old college friend who was now married to one of James' cousins. "Did you actually pull the honeymoon trip?" I replied. "Yes." She answered, "Good." People need to stop assuming kindness is something you owe them forever. That stayed with me. I hadn't realized how much I'd trained everyone to think I was the backup battery, the one who kicked in when things got tight, who smiled through being overlooked, who filled in the cracks without needing credit. Maybe it was on me, but maybe that's what they'd come to count on. My silence. Not this time, not anymore. Saturday morning arrived without fanfare. No texts from Delphine, no new drama, just quiet. I spent the first half of the day cleaning fridge, pantry, even the ceiling fan I always ignored. Anything to avoid checking my phone again. By late afternoon, I knew the wedding had started. I wasn't invited, but I knew the time. I knew the venue. I even knew the song Delphine had picked to walk down the aisle to, because I helped her choose it months ago, back when I still thought we were planning it together. I didn't plan on doing anything dramatic. I'd already said what I needed to say in the clearest language I could. No more. But at 5:17 p.m., a message lit up my screen from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey, someone at the venue just showed me a video. I think you need to see this." Attached was a Dropbox link. I hesitated. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another petty jab disguised as concern. Then I clicked. The video was barely 2 minutes long, shot from the side of a floral arch, with bad lighting and a shaky hand. A younger voice spoke off-camera Tamsin's cousin, I realized, the junior videographer Delphine had hired. Delphine and Cordelia stood beneath the arch, fussing over a ribbon that wouldn't sit straight. They didn't know they were being recorded. Cordelia adjusted a bouquet and said clearly, "Make sure she doesn't know the trip's already in the booklet." Delphine, holding a glass of champagne, laughed. "If she finds out, we'll say it was a miscommunication. She always backs off." They both laughed, loud, relaxed, like this was all a game. I watched it twice. then a third time, just to be sure I hadn't misheard. They weren't just omitting me. They were mocking me, planning for the fallout in advance, betting on my silence like it was a given. I forwarded the video to 3 people. No commentary, just the footage. One of those 3 was the wedding coordinator. I didn't expect what happened next. According to another message I received around 6:20 p.m., the reception had begun. People were finishing their entrees, and the slideshow of Delphine and James's relationship, childhood photos, couple vacations, awkward prom pics was playing on loop in the background. That's when the screen suddenly cut to black. A beat of confusion. Then the video began. Not the wedding slideshow. The clip. Cordelia. Delphine. The confession. The laughter. Silence blanketed the room. Forks froze midair. Aunts gasped. Cousins whispered. Uncle Jonas stood up. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since he stopped coming to family functions, when Cordelia made some off-color comment about his wife's weight. But apparently, he'd been invited to the wedding and had been drinking just enough wine to remember how to use a microphone. He walked to the center of the room and took it like it was Sunday at church. There's someone missing here, he said, and I think it's time people knew why. Delphine moved quickly, tried to laugh it off. Uncle Jonas. He raised a hand. Let me finish. The DJ didn't cut him off. The waitstaff paused mid-pour. This family has a habit of choosing silence over truth, of rewriting things to make some folks more comfortable, but we've all seen what just played on that screen. And if you still want to pretend it didn't happen, that's on you. But I won't. He put the mic down and walked out. People clapped. Not many, but enough. Cordelia stood and left the room without saying a word. Delphine followed, her face pale and unreadable. I didn't go. I didn't need to. The truth had finally done what I couldn't. It stood up for itself. And for once, I wasn't the one who had to leave the room to feel heard. The morning after the wedding felt like standing outside a storm that had finally passed. The sky was overcast, heavy but dry. I walked to the corner print shop, not because I had to, there was a FedEx center closer, but because the old man behind the counter never asked questions. Just printed what you gave him and nodded like he understood more than he said. I slid the flash drive across the counter and opened my bag. 8 envelopes, each one hand-labeled in my own handwriting. 1 for Cordelia, 1 for Delphine, 1 each for Vanessa, Marjorie, and a few others who had played their roles a little too well. All carefully sealed. Inside each envelope was the same set of documents. A printed still from the video Delphine mid-laugh, Cordelia with her hand frozen in a gesture, along with copies of my annotated credit card statements, and a short letter. It said, "This is not revenge. This is clarity." The man didn't comment. Just packed each one into a padded envelope, weighed them, and printed the postage. Want tracking? He asked. No, I said. They'll know. Back home, I changed into sweats, tied my hair up, and did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the boxes from the back of my closet, those dusty, taped-up cartons from my last move that I kept telling myself I'd sort through. The third box down held photo albums, a few old letters, and a navy blue folder I didn't recognize at first. Inside was a yellowed envelope with my name, written in my dad's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. There was a date on the corner. 15 years ago. I opened it slowly, already knowing it was never meant to find me when it was written. Raylene, if you ever read this, it means I didn't do what I said I would. I told myself I'd take you and go, but your mother, she doesn't make that easy. Still, I see what she does. I see what they let her do, and I see how small you've learned to make yourself just to stay in the room. I should have fought harder for you. I'm sorry. I sat with that letter in my lap, the paper soft and fragile in my hands. I wasn't sure if I felt comforted or betrayed. Maybe both. Maybe neither. It reframed so much my childhood. The way Dad had always hovered at the edges, rarely intervening, always tired. I used to think he just didn't care enough. Now I saw the truth. He did, but not enough to risk peace. Not enough to act. I folded the letter back, gently, and placed it on the kitchen table like it needed time to breathe. By late afternoon, I'd started to get the texts he'd been waiting for. Some were brief. Received your letter. Not sure what you expect me to say. Others were more defensive. You didn't have to humiliate everyone, Ray. Delphine's came last. You made your point. Can we talk now? I typed a reply, then erased it. Instead, I placed the phone screen down and stood up. There was nothing left to explain. This wasn't about getting the last word. It was about finally being done with the conversation. The next week, I scheduled a meeting with a nonprofit in town that worked with women navigating legal disputes within families, inheritance manipulation, elder abuse, forged financial documents. They welcomed volunteers with relevant life experience. I didn't go into detail. I didn't need to. When they asked if I'd be willing to speak on a panel someday, I said maybe. But only if I could stay off the poster. Not because I was afraid, but because some truths are heavier when whispered. I never moved away from Asheville, but I stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. That's the real kind of leaving. The truth didn't bring closure, but it brought oxygen. And that was enough. The last time I drove past my mother's house, the porch light was off. The windows were dark. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just whispered, without bitterness or grief. The things I lost there taught me what'll never give away again. The leaves had already turned that year when I passed Cordelia's house again. The same porch where I used to sit every fall, wrapped in a blanket I never really liked, holding mugs of cider and pretending we were something closer than we were. This time, there were no cars in the driveway, no folding chairs on the lawn, no scattered cigarette butts in the planter from Uncle Jonas sneaking a smoke between courses. Just silence, and a mailbox tilting slightly to the left, like it was tired of waiting for anything to arrive. Vanessa had mentioned it 2 weeks earlier in a call that started with "Hey" and ended with "We should catch up. No one's coming this year," she had said. No one knows what to say anymore. I didn't ask if she'd still go. That was her decision to make. I had already made mine. And as I passed the dark windows that used to flicker with holiday light, I didn't feel smug or vindicated. I just felt done. Like I'd finished reading a story I knew wouldn't end well, but needed to close anyway. A few days later, I met Ellie for coffee. She's one of the younger women I mentor at the Center Sharp, skeptical, and a little too quick to deflect kindness. She reminds me of myself in all the ways that make me want to be better. We were halfway through discussing her upcoming hearing when she looked up and said, "So Delphine lost her job?" I blinked. "What?" "Yeah," she shrugged, sipping her latte. "My cousin's in PR. Says someone in her department forwarded that wedding video around. I didn't react right away. Not because it didn't matter, but because I didn't know how I felt about it. I hadn't filed any formal complaint. Hadn't sent the clip to anyone but the planner and 2 relatives. I didn't need to. It moved on its own. Turns out, in their world, perception matters more than paper. And that laugh, the one Delphine let out on camera when she talked about manipulating me, wasn't so easy to explain to a board full of clients. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just nodded. That's unfortunate. Ellie raised an eyebrow. Unfortunate? I shrugged. Sometimes the truth has its own schedule. My apartment is smaller now, cozy, not cramped. The kind of place where I know the sound the radiator makes before it kicks in, and the exact spot the sun hits around 3:30 in the afternoon. I walk most mornings, work from home, cook more than I used to. On Thursdays, I go to the center and sit in a folding chair beside women who are learning, slowly, painfully, that being family doesn't always mean being safe. I don't talk much unless asked. I don't share every detail of what happened. But when someone asks, I tell them this. It doesn't matter what they call you if you know your own name. That's enough. One Saturday, while reorganizing a drawer full of batteries and expired coupons, I found a photo wedged between 2 old journals. It was one I hadn't seen in years. Me, Delphine, and Vanessa at Myrtle Beach, covered in sand and laughing so hard we were barely upright. For a second, I considered throwing it away. It would have been easy, thoughtless. But I didn't. Instead, I found a small box I kept for things I didn't want out, but didn't want gone. I labeled it with a post-it, proof that even false warmth can still be warmth. Because not everything was a lie. Some of it had been real, just not enough to keep. Healing didn't mean they changed. It meant they no longer defined me. Before we end this story, let me leave you with something personal. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that peace doesn't come from making everyone else comfortable. Sometimes it comes from disappointing the people who built their comfort on your silence. For a long time, I thought love meant staying, enduring, making room even when there wasn't any left for me. But now I understand that walking away isn't failure, it's self-respect. And choosing yourself, especially when no one else will, is one of the hardest, bravest things you can do. So if you're someone watching this and thinking, this feels too familiar, maybe you're the one who always gives, who gets rewritten or left off the list. Let me tell you this. You are allowed to stop explaining. You are allowed to change the story. You are allowed to leave the room and still matter. Have you ever been the quiet one? The peacemaker? The one who swallowed everything so others wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable? Let me know in the comments. Type 1. If this story resonated with you, or just tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too. And if you didn't like this video, that's okay, drop a comment and tell me why. I'm here for real stories, not just the polished ones. If this video touched something in you, or made you think about your own family in a different light, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. We've got more stories coming, real, raw, and deeply human, just like this one. Thanks for being here. And remember, sometimes letting go isn't the end, it's the beginning of finally holding on to yourself.